All right, well, I am very excited about our guest today. Today is 9/11, and we are thrilled to have Phil Koontz, former Navy SEAL, join us. In addition, to have Pat Scanlon, who's on our Veterans Financial Advisor Network. This is a day that we probably all remember where we were, and we know what happened. And here we want to take the time to spend time with Phil Koontz, talk about the mindset of a Navy SEAL, talk about what it takes to prepare, some of the things that you've seen and been through, and the mindset of elevating your thought patterns and getting over adversity. And so with that, I wanted to start with Pat and just doing somewhat of an introduction and welcoming our guests.
So, Phil, impressive background, Navy SEAL, 78 combat missions, family guy, 5 children. Your father was a financial advisor too, and the myriad of things that you bring to the table from your experiences. During your talk earlier today, you led some discussion on mindset and the factor of time in the mindset of a SEAL. Chris and I were talking about that. That is a very interesting thing about blocking off time and how you perceive your day. Can you maybe elaborate on a couple thoughts on that? Maybe the mindset of maybe sometimes it might have to go to the minutes. You mentioned meals and stuff like that as being benchmarks. Love to hear your comments on that.
Yeah, I think sometimes, man, in life when we get hit hard, and today we're celebrating the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, where our country got hit hard. And so when we're battling with that adversity in life and the ups and downs, sometimes it's good just to kind of make those baby steps, right?
Yeah.
It's good just to break down your main goal, your bigger goal, into more bite-sized type pieces. And so I encourage people, I'm like, hey, take it one meal at a time, take it one small goal at a time. Like I mentioned this morning, maybe your first goal is just getting out of bed in the morning, struggling with depression and just the loneliness and the isolation factor there, and wondering if you're the only one that's struggling with it and what's wrong with me and all those thoughts, that can be invasive at times. Breaking down your day into smaller size goals really helps gain that momentum. And sometimes it really is like a minute by minute, just speaking that truth to ourselves, stopping those thoughts. I've kind of have like a 5S model, which we can get into, but I mean, it's just how do you recognize those intrusive thoughts, stop those thoughts, substitute, kind of distract yourself a little bit so then you can continue to move on.
Yeah, I know you spoke earlier about fear and being fearful and the difference of both. And you talked about a little bit of the human nature of, fear is there, it's human, it's just, it happens. But being fearful, and I took that being a former athlete and, in the business that we're in and we have clients and we're, fear is everywhere. You turn on the news, there's fear. What separates, Navy SEALs, what separates the Navy SEALs from others when you're thinking about, fear in that moment, but not being fearful to where you freeze?
Yeah, it takes a lot of training to do that. A lot of times when we feel triggered, when we get triggered because of an external circumstance, sometimes it's hard to, it's like that fight, flight, or freeze. A lot of times we freeze, and then like we were just talking about, then you get in your own mind. And BUDS, our training is 70%, at least 70% mental, 30% physical, maybe 20% physical, because that's when the instructors want to see if you've got what it takes after your body's already been broken down and you're the worst case the worst condition you've ever been in your entire life, and your body is broken. That's when they want to see if you've got the ability between your 2 ears to really mentally persevere through the adversity that we're going through. So a lot of times it's recognizing the stuff that we're in, and then just powering through it.
And to tail off on that, so you talked in your discussion also about the preparation that you did for one of your major missions in the Middle East, the 6 months that you did, and those reps that you did over those 6 months. Maybe to join what Chris is asking, what are some of the reps that you do throughout the day to keep yourself in that positive vein, to overcome those negativities, whether in your ministry or in your own everyday life, maybe dealing with things that a lot of soldiers still have, PTSD, any of those topics?
Yeah. There's it's a daily fight sometimes, just wrestling with some of the operator syndrome, which is what I've been diagnosed with, and just the daily uphill battles that is, both physically, I've got herniated discs in my back. My left labrum is torn 340 degrees in my left shoulder, and so it's still maintaining that positive mindset even in the midst of doing pull-ups, even in the midst of doing exercises and really telling yourself, hey, just get to the next minute, get to the next 5 minutes, just conquer that hill one at a time. And kind of circling back to some of the fear aspect. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, you're a Navy SEAL, like you're not afraid of anything, right? And it's like, I'm still a human being, you know, like you cut me, I'm still gonna bleed, right? I put my pants on just like everybody else does. So it's okay. Yeah. And especially for the viewers, it's okay to feel fear. Yeah. It's okay to feel fear. That's a human, God-given emotion for us to feel fear at times. However, it's what do you do with that fear? Do you allow that fear to overwhelm you, to paralyze you, where that's all you can do is just think about what if scenarios and worst case scenarios, and before you know it, you're all spun up here, and you're paralyzed and you're freaking out, and you can't make any forward progress. Your creativity goes down the toilet, and it's really hard to be successful when you're paralyzed with that fear. So recognizing that fear, but then what are the tools that you use to kind of move through that fear? And one of those we talked about is just making those small goals, just that next hill to take. Yeah.
It's funny that you know it. Like we're all in business, and we do a lot of training for younger advisors or young business owners, and a lot of this can be fearful at first, and you can always smell when fear is in the water. I'm not sure what instincts we have, but when someone's in front of you and they're just whether they're not confident, maybe they haven't prepared like what had you talked about, and they're not ready for the moment. And so I read your book. It's a phenomenal book. I was really impressed. I'm a fitness, one of those guys that's big into fitness, and I noticed that you work out five days a week, and you also do cardio an hour a week. What about the physical side complements the mental side of what we do and what you do?
Yeah, it's huge. So I work out a minimum of 5 days. Sometimes I try to get my 6th day. But my non-negotiable every day is that hour of cardio where I'm pushing myself. And there's something magical that happens when you push yourself physically at the end of a workout. You never feel bad about yourself, right? You're always like, like I got it, like I crushed that, and then it motivates you, to get that next workout, to push your heart rate just a little bit more, to burn 10 or 50 extra calories, on the elliptical or the treadmill or whatever you're doing, calisthenics or weightlifting. So there's a very natural flow between the physical and the mental. In your mind, you can accomplish far more than you think you can. And especially as Americans, I mean, don't get me on my soapbox, but there's a lot of comfortable Americans. There's a lot of people that are very apathetic, that are very comfortable, that are complacent, and they're fine just kind of meeting the bare minimum type thing. And no one really seems to do anything hard anymore. And so a lot of times what I encourage, I'm a life and business coach, and one of the things I encourage my clients to do, I'm like, look, like just do one hard thing a day. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Walk your dog an extra lap around the block, or run an extra mile, or write that letter that you've been putting off, or that email that you've been putting off. Say you're sorry to somebody. Ask for forgiveness. I mean, it doesn't have to be a physical thing, but just do something hard to get you outside of your comfort zone, because every time we do, guess what? We grow a little bit more as a person. And I don't know about you, but I want to become Phil Koontz 2.0 and 3.0 and 4, right? So I got a lot more life to live and a lot more to experience and a lot of growth. But I really do try every day to push myself a little bit more and just do something hard that day.
Yeah, and it gets harder the longer you wait. Every year you take off, it gets harder and harder. Your body ages, and it's harder to maintain. So it's great to hear. That was very inspiring. When I read that, I was very impressed.
You have to build that discipline. You're not just going to wake up and all of a sudden immediately have the discipline, immediately be like, all right, I'm motivated. I mean, it does take a little bit. It's like that crawl, walk, run that we go through in training in the SEAL teams, right? We're not running right away, right off the bat. It's a crawl, walk, run. And so it's developing that mindset. And after about 30 to 40 days, you start to develop that habit, and then it becomes a lot easier. But let's face it, it sucks. For those first 30, 40 days, I mean, literally picking yourself up and forcing yourself to do something maybe it's like diet, right? It's like, no, don't go for that Twinkie, don't go for that Snickers, don't go for that extra piece of pizza, don't do it. So it doesn't, again, have to be physical. A lot of this is nutrition, this is discipline. And
it's avoiding the path of least resistance. And going back to the sports analogy, you got to take your reps. And whether you're Michael Jordan, he never stopped shooting free throws his entire career.
Yeah.
And as a Navy SEAL, you mentioned that you guys all do your reps. You're always going over your rituals. I'm curious in that way, how does this tie into your ministry that you have in Colorado? Can you share a little bit about that?
So it kind of goes back. I've been working with child trafficking for about 15 years. When I first got out of the military, I was a contractor. I was a sensitive site exploitation instructor. And it's a whole other conversation for another time. And then it was really kind of cool because the door opened for me to step into pastoral ministry. So I moved from Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I was a contractor, back to Cincinnati, Ohio, where I was born and raised, and became a community life pastor at that point. Was there for about a couple of years, and then did a transfer out to Aurora, Colorado for another year and a half in the same ministry. And then I went back to Denver Seminary to get my master's in leadership. But it was during that time I was introduced to this very real issue that a lot of Americans are either blindly turning their eye to or just aren't aware. They're a little naive. But the United States is the #1 consumer in the world with human trafficking.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a $250 billion industry. And I won't go into some of the details, but I mean, it's very lucrative because you can use that person multiple times. It's not like a drug dealer where, it's like, okay, you have the drugs, I got the money, and then we're gone. That's why it's so lucrative. And I tell people there's a special place in hell for those people who traffic kids. So I've been to Cambodia, I've been to Thailand, down into the Dominican Republic, working with the ATB, the Anti-Trafficking Bureau. Spent some time working with Destiny Rescue. So who knows? Once my kids are all out of the house, all 5 kids, my youngest is 11, so I've got like 7 or 8 more years.
Wow.
But once the kids are out of the house, I'm like, honey, my wife, I'm like, let's go.
Yeah.
It's time to maybe go and spread our wings a little bit internationally, and maybe jump back into that industry a little bit too.
That's awesome. Well, I know you've brought some of your gear
Yeah,
with us.
let's
You wanna
get into
kinda
some of this.
Share
I almost
what
want
is
to
some of
reach
this?
in and kind of smell, because gear has
Oh,
a
yeah.
certain smell.
It does.
And it has a recall to it.
It's going to
But
bring
I'm
you.
going to avoid that.
It's going to bring you back.
I'm
to
going to avoid
to the
that.
glory
But go
days.
ahead. Let's get into this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I travel. I'm a public speaker, right? So I've been doing this for 10 years. So one of the things that's unique about me is I bring out some of my gear. I call it an adult show and tell. Right? I like talking about it, passing it around. So I've got one of the sets of H gear, harness gear that I used during my second and subsequent deployments right here. Our primary weapon is our M4 in the SEAL teams. Our secondary weapon is a SIG 226, and my SIG went right here. Yep. I had pockets here for my magazines, for my M4, for my SIG. There's pockets to the left and right here. There's 4 different types of grenades that we use. I'm sure you're well aware. Smoke grenades, frag grenades, thermite grenades, concussion grenades. So we load those out. Our comms system goes on here. And then this set of H gear is pretty unique because it holds both sets of my body armor inside of it. And this is my body armor. You can pick it up if you want.
That's pretty, for anyone watching.
So the weight really does add up. So when you're a full loadout, depending on what weapon system you're carrying, you're either 50 or 80 pounds heavier.
And people forget that you're not just walking down the street going to 7-Eleven for a Slurpee. the terrain is irregular.
Oh yeah.
The temperatures.
Yep. 95 to 100 degrees at night in the Middle East.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then to your point, like earlier today, about sometimes the endless days that go on into perpetuity without sleep, and that dealing through that deprivation every day, all the time. Those where those reps come in, where you've done it, you're going to do it again, and you're prepped for it. I want to talk about a little what's going on here.
With my helmet, yes. So that helmet is ergonomically designed to be able to stop a 7.62 round. This soft here is calibrated to stop a 9mm round. This plate right here is a 5.5, can stop a 5.56 round.
Is this Kevlar?
It is.
It's still Kevlar.
It is.
Still.
Yep. And then both of these together can stop a 7.62 round. So that one is designed to be able to stop a 7.62 round. It's about 4.5, 5 pounds. Wow. Our night optical devices fit right there on the harness right there, and they're about 2 pounds. So our nods mount. That's our nods, our night optical devices, or our NVGs, right? So our NVGs fit right there on the mount. They're an additional 2 pounds, and then we have a 2-pound counterweight in the back as well too. So we've got about about 9 to 10 pounds on our head at any given night while we're operating, along with our loadout and our body armor and everything else. So it's you don't want to be that guy, right? Talking about an athlete, like you don't want to be that guy that brings the whole team down, right? And oftentimes, like you said, like our infill or exfil routes, they could be 4 or 5 kilometers, which is 2 to 3 miles, and it's hard.
Wow. Well, you definitely have to be in shape, so I totally understand the minimum of 5 workouts a day plus an hour of cardio.
Well, let's be honest. I'd be in a straitjacket right now if I didn't get my workouts. My wife would be like, "It's time for you to go to the gym."
You look a little tense.
Yeah, right.
Take a walk for an hour. Yeah.
And let me just say this: like, I'm not a gym rat. I don't prefer to go to the gym. Yeah. If I could maintain my physical fitness while watching Netflix and eating pizza at home, like all day long.
Hawaii 5-0 reruns. We talk about. I go in. I say, Chris, what do you think about this new powder? We're talking about this all the time. Yeah. We're all in the same thing. We're doing this. We're doing the protein and everything else.
Workouts.
We got early workouts, late workouts. We're fitting them in where we can.
We have a gym in our office on the 3rd floor, just for to stay in shape. But this is impressive. So. To transition a little bit, you wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about that, and for the viewers, what was some of your thoughts around the book, and some ideas to share with the book. And I don't want to give anything away, but feel free and enlighten us on that.
So the truth behind my Trident, our Trident is our military insignia. This is the first Trident that I was ever pinned. This is what we call our bird or our Budweiser. So once you're pinned your Trident, you're officially a Navy SEAL. So the truth behind my Trident is, hey, I want to pull back the curtain a little bit, walk through my own personal journey in the SEAL teams, show the public really what an average day in the life of a SEAL looks like. Yeah. Because one day it dawned on me after seeing some of the movies that are out there, right? The Zero Dark 30s, The Lone Survivors, 13 Hours, all of those. Hollywood does a really good job of portraying the missions, in my opinion, of SEALs, and they actually have active duty Navy SEALs right there on set, teaching them what our standard operating procedures are. And I'm like, guys, I understand that Hollywood wants to make a truckload of money with this movie, but you guys realize Americans aren't the only ones watching these movies too, right? And we're giving a lot of our ROEs, our rules of engagement and SOPs away on the big screen. So that's when I figuratively hit the pause button one day, and I just calculated out how much time is actually spent boots on the ground conducting our missions. It's about 3%. 3% of our time. The other 97% of our time is all in preparation, and that's what I really wanted to unpack a little bit in my book.
So for many of our viewers are in 2 different stages. Many of them are starting out their own business or new advisors, and some have been in the business for 30 years. What would you give someone starting today or tomorrow? What kind of advice would you give them? And then what advice would you give someone, the 30-year veteran, who is just looking to take their game to the next level?
Yeah, perfect. Great question. So ironically, being a successful advisor is about the same attrition rate as it is to be a SEAL. About 80%, 90% of the guys and the girls who try to be a successful advisor end up washing out. And probably for different reasons, I'm thinking, right? Just teasing.
A lot of them.
You're not doing drown proofing and surf torture, right, and all that.
Wow.
But the mentality is still the same. And so for me, when I went in to BUDS, which stands for Basic Underwater Demolition School, it's the first block of our training. I told my wife at this time, I said, I would rather die than quit. And I was dead serious. I was like, I drew that line in the sand, and I said, I'm not quitting, so I would rather die than quit. And I'm a man of faith, and so for me, I'm like, well, if I die, I meet Jesus, and if I don't die, I become a Navy SEAL. So it was a win-win for me at that point, right? It's like, hey, either one's fine with me, right? It's good. And so I think it's that mentality, and I don't want to sound cliche, but it's that don't quit kind of mentality. As soon as you open the door, and this applies to like working out too, as soon as you crack that door a little bit, like, well, if it gets too hard, or well, if I get rejected too much, or well, if I, whatever that is, if it gets this bad, then I might consider, punching out. It's that's a defeatist, closed-minded mindset already from the beginning. And those guys that have that mindset, I guarantee you're going to wash out. You're going to quit. You're going to end up DORing or dropping on request, right? Which is what the candidates do in BUDS. So it's that mindset. It's that mindset of like, I'd rather die than quit. It's like you're not giving yourself any other option. It's like, I'm going to make it or I'm going to die trying.
I love that.
Right. So that's for the new guys. For the older guys who've been in the industry for a long time, I think circling back to what we were talking about earlier is don't be complacent.
Yeah.
You know, don't be that advisor that thinks, I've been in the industry for 30 years. I'm comfortable. I've got all the products that I need, you know, and I'm good. I'm comfortable. I would challenge them to continue to learn, to continue to update their products, to continue to take the meetings from the wholesalers. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, and as well as identifying some training, additional training maybe that they can go through, like active listening training. Or empathy training, right? I mean, if you're my client and you come in and you just had to put your parents in hospice, or your wife just got a crazy diagnosis, or you know your kids got into a car accident, life happens, right? My job is to empathize with you. My job is to show you how much I care. And empathy is different than sympathy. Empathy is identifying the emotion within someone and connecting with that emotion. You know, it's loneliness, it's isolation, it's hurt, it's fear, whatever that might be. Connecting with that forms that bond. So for the seasoned advisors, I'd say, what is some additional training that you can go through to really help you stay current and have that humble learning posture and don't get too comfortable? Because comfortability leads to complacency. Complacency leads to apathy, and apathy leads to atrophy. And once you're atrophy, it's dead. It's gone, right? So that's my 2 cents.
Well, that was powerful. And with that, I want to thank the two of you for joining us today here in Chicago on 9/11. Thank you to State Street for being a great partner. Thank you, Phil, for making the flight to Chicago. For our viewers, thank you all for joining in. And we'll have the link below for the book if you're interested. Thank you all.